The Nintendo Switch 2 may have been revealed in a number of leaked images, from a number of 3D CAD models depicting the actual design of the Switch 2 to images of the Joy-Cons, as well as an actual case and motherboard leak. Additionally, the full list of specs has also been leaked, so here are 6 of the biggest new Switch 2 leaks. Also, since we're in mid-September now, we've been launching some truly incredible wallpaper packs for our own app called Wallpapers. They're all made by our talented creators from all over the world, and all designs are of stunning quality and in 8K resolution, so that you can crop in loads and use them on your smartphone, tablet, and even desktop. Try our app Wallpapers for free on iOS and Android by using the links below. Okay, so let's start off with the leaked CAD models. What you're seeing here is essentially a repost. The original post was posted on a Chinese social media website by a 3D model enthusiast. They have been deleted since. So what do these images show us? Well, from the front, we can see a much larger display, which does seem to match the 8-inch display leaks from before, as opposed to the 7-inch panel on the Switch OLED. Now, the interesting thing here is when we take a look at the button layout, as there seems to be an additional button on the right Joy-Con right below the home button. And the reason why this is so interesting is because this was already leaked back in April by a Chinese tech website. They did show us this additional button right here, exactly where we have it on this leaked CAD model. What's even more interesting is when we take a look at the back of the Joy-Con. It seems to have this fairly large trigger on the back. Now, of course, you could say that maybe this is the button to detach the Joy-Cons from the Switch, which may be true. But I feel like it's way too big for that, and instead, it could be a back trigger. In fact, if we take a look at some of the older leaks, this one was also leaked back in April, so I think there is some legitimacy to it. Now, if we take a look at the side rail, we can see some significant upgrades here too. And this was rumored to be made out of metal on the Switch 2 for increased durability. And just by looking at the leaked CAD, we can see that it sticks out far more than it does right now on the current Joy-Con. Then, on the top, we can see a number of changes too. Comparing it against the Switch OLED, we can see that the volume buttons are more separated now, probably to make them easier to distinguish and press. The vent is now larger, and we also have a USB-C port on the top. Before, this was on the bottom. And before we move on to the bottom, one more thing that I've noticed at the top is the slightly redesigned game card slot, which will still be present and needed for the new exclusive Switch 2 games. And apparently this will also support backwards compatibility with the Switch 1 cartridges. Now, if we take a look at the bottom, we can see the 2 speaker grills, the mounting pins for the dock, and surprisingly, another USB-C port? Personally, I love this, as charging the Switch from the bottom while playing was never very convenient, and now it seems like Nintendo's giving us both options. And lastly, if we take a look at the back, we can see the new kickstand against the original Switch ones, and this new kickstand does resemble the one on the Switch OLED, only a tiny bit larger. Which brings me to the leaked Joy-Cons. We've got an image of the plastic shell right here, and there are a couple of changes that I'm already seeing compared to the current Joy-Cons. For example, the SR and SL buttons are significantly bigger now, which I really love to see. This should make couch multiplayer games a far better experience. Then, the round pairing button seems to have been moved from the middle to the top, and in the middle, we now have this weird connector. I've got a feeling that this may have something to do with the new electromagnetic mounting system that's been rumored to come to the Switch 2 as well. So I'm assuming that there may be now a way of detaching the Joy-Cons from the software so that that trigger on the back can be used as an actual trigger button in games instead. But yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on this as well. And this brings me to the leaked motherboard. Digital Foundry shared this too, and they do believe that this may actually be legit. Of course, we can see the updated Joy-Con case above, with the new button on the right Joy-Con, and the much larger mounting rails, which now seem to house the LED lights for the battery status. But on top of that, this motherboard does reveal some interesting details. User Nintendo highlights some of its main components. Just take a look at how much internal space the game card slot takes. This also confirms that we've got a micro SD card slot at the bottom, but I think the most interesting thing here is just how small the battery is, something that Digital Foundry is also quite surprised about. And what's more is that if we compare it against the Switch OLED's battery, and this one appears to be way bigger. Now, I do doubt that the battery life is actually worse than the Switch OLED, so I think what's simply happening here is that Nintendo is using a newer battery technology, which is more efficient, hence allowing for a more dense battery. We already saw this with silicon carbon batteries inside phones like the Honor Magic V2 or V3, allowing them to be unbelievably thin, whilst also having a capacity of over 5,000 mAh. Now, back to the motherboard, Digital Foundry also notes that the PCB number actually lines up with the previously leaked shipment data for Switch 2 prototypes, which means that this motherboard is likely of a Switch 2 prototype or even a dev kit rather than an actual retail unit. So the final result may be slightly different, hopefully with a larger battery. I do hope though that they do keep those dual USB-C charging ports. Now let's talk about the leaked specs. There was a large list of components, each with their own model number, that was also posted alongside the other leaks on a Chinese forum. Here's the list, and there are already some interesting things that I can see here. First, we can see that we'll get 12 GB of RAM, LPDDR5X memory too, with a speed of 7,500 megatransfers per second. Second, the internal storage is now 256 GB, up from 32 on the original Switch and 64 on the Switch OLED. And third, we now seem to have dual cooling fans, up from the single fan that we had on the Switch OLED. This is some really great news, because it simply means that Nintendo is really going to be pushing their new chip, which is obviously going to be leagues more powerful than the Tegra X1 inside the current Switch. Speaking of the new chip, the model number for this is GMLX30RA1. So yeah, I googled this model number and I found out that this was very first reported in March of 2024. And guess what? The model number corresponds to the Tegra T239 chip. This was the long-rumored chip for the Nintendo Switch 2. The T239 features 8 A78C ARM cores, and also NVIDIA's Ampere architecture. Ampere is what was used in the RTX 3000 series and not a 4000, so it is NVIDIA's previous architecture, but one that of course allows for the much improved DLSS 3 and 3.5, something that is also rumored to be included in the Switch 2 to allow for 4K resolutions when connected to a TV. Now, all of these leaked specs do actually match up perfectly with the previously leaked specs from back in May, so there's a very good chance that these are indeed the final specs for the Switch 2. Now, the next leak is the release date. Taiwan Economic Daily News reports that because of Sony's recent PS5 Pro announcement, Nintendo decided to push the Switch 2 release earlier, so that the Switch 2 will release before the end of the year instead of early next year. Obviously, this does make a lot of sense, as they can take advantage of the holiday season and sell way more units that way. Plus, the Switch 2 doesn't really overlap with the PS5 Pro, as they're completely different consoles that play completely different games. So it's not like Nintendo will be competing with Sony for sales, maybe to some extent, but I think that degree is going to be very small. Which means that we could see an official Switch 2 unveil in October, especially now that so many leaks have come out. Which brings me to the price. According to Taiwan Economic Daily News, the Switch 2 will sell for $400, so $100 more than the original Switch and $50 more compared to the Switch OLED. I honestly don't think that the price is too bad, especially when you consider all the improvements that the Switch 2 will come with, from the much improved performance to 4K capabilities when docked, to the larger display and updated Joy-Cons. I do think it's justifiable. But what do you guys think about all of these Switch 2 leaks? Will you be upgrading, or will you be going for something like a PS5 or a PS5 Pro instead? Video on the PS5 Pro, by the way, right here. Check out our app Wallpapers, link down below, for some awesome 8K designs. I'm Daniel, this is Enough Tech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. This is Enough Tech, signing out. Cheers.